Welcome to the Elevating Funeral Service podcast. If you want to run a successful funeral home, cemetery, or pet cremation service, you don't have to be the one that has the lowest price. You do need to be the one that offers the most value, provides the best customer experience, and clearly communicates that in your marketing. On this weekly podcast, Ellery and Welton will show easy ways to demonstrate value to families and create differentiation that helps you stand out from the competition. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Elevating Funeral Service. I'm your host, Ellery Bowker. I'm with my good friend and co-host, Welton Hong. This is the podcast where we talk about ideas for funeral homes and cemeteries that stand out from their competition. We're now in part 2 of a 3-part episode about doing that very thing, standing out from your competition by way of online reviews. As I said, this is the second episode. This is a 3-part series we're doing. The first part was we talked about the importance of getting online reviews. Today, we're going to be talking about what to do if you get a negative review, and that's probably going to happen at some point. And then next week, we're going to talk about how to get more online reviews. So we're going to jump right into this. Welton, how are you doing?
Doing good. Just still, I've been focusing a lot on writing job descriptions for our employees. That seems kind of fun.
Yeah, you're growing your team like crazy, aren't you?
Yeah, almost 60 headcounts already. So.
60? Wow, that's crazy. Well, knowing you, I know you've got a lot of processes and you've got everything right down to a science. So I suppose that scaling that is not as difficult as it would be for some people. But yeah, that's awesome. What part of your business is growing kind of the most? Is it the PPC side or?
Still the fulfillment side. Yeah,
okay.
Really trying to, I'm purposely taking advantage right now to look for talents. Used to be very hard to find talents. The economy was too good, but taking a little bit of advantage of COVID-19, trying to think a little opposite of what everybody else is doing is hiring a little bit more right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's been a war on talent for years now. Now with, I think, 25 or 30 million people being unemployed, I mean, it's definitely a good time to try to grab some people that are in transition right now. So awesome. Well, listen, let's jump right into this. So last week we talked about the importance of getting online reviews. Today we're going to talk about what happens if you get a negative review.
Right.
Now, if you haven't had one yet, you probably are going to get one. That's just going to happen. If you're serving enough families, there's a likelihood that you're going to get one. So what I wanted to do, for those of you that are listening, Welton has worked on a framework, and Welton is very well versed in online reviews. And he and I don't talk about our companies very much, but both of our companies actually work with funeral homes to get more online reviews. So we're well versed in kind of how to get these, and Welton is very well versed in how to deal with some of the bad ones. So, Welton, let's walk through this. So I'm a funeral home owner. I get an alert, or I happen to look on my Google page, and somebody has just slayed me, right? They've just told me I was terrible. We did a terrible job. It's a scathing review, and that has got to feel like a punch in the gut, right?
Oh, boy.
Like, wow, what happened? Okay, so you have a process on how to deal with this. Walk me through that. What's the first thing you should do?
Definitely. And I kind of call it step 0 because I call it step 0 is you got to detach. You got to cool down.
Cool down.
You got to cool down before you do anything, or else you might regret. And we all know that we poured our heart out on these services, right? We genuinely do care. And whenever somebody leaves us negative review, it just really just hurts like crazy, right? So definitely step 0, you gotta detach. I typically do recommend, don't do anything right away. Go grab a drink of water, really cool down.
Because we're probably not going to look at these objectively, right? Nope. We're going to take any of them as an insult, right? Like, how could somebody say that about me?
Oh, yeah.
So, right. So taking that time to kind of detach, like you said, is probably a good point. Yeah. So the first step, and I would agree with you on that, right, is just don't panic. The world has not come to an end. It's one person's opinion. They just happen to put it out there publicly. So you're right on that. And I think that's the same in anything in life. When you get, put on tilt or riled up about something, you got to take a step back. So, all right. So don't panic, detach yourself, take a step back. What's the next thing you should do?
Yeah. And there's a reason why they left that negative review in the beginning. It's they want to be heard, right? They didn't leave that negative review for no reason, right? They want to be heard. So most likely, again, just think a little more objectively why they left that negative review. There must be something that feels short. Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. You and I were talking a little bit earlier, and sometimes people are not going to tell you they're mad at you, right? Or
No.
tell you they're upset at you, but there's a lot of anonymity behind that keyboard, right? And they feel
Right.
like they can articulate their anger, right? Or
Right.
they're being
Right.
upset a little bit more with a keyboard, right? And with
Right.
words than they
Yeah.
could in front of you. Because again, some people might not like confrontation,
No.
and they feel like telling you something in person would be
Right.
confrontational, where they can go just kind of vent on
Oh
on
yeah.
the keyboard. And I've said this before, and it's probably worth noting that the bar is not quite fair. And what I mean is that, people have to be over the moon happy with you to leave you a positive
Oh
review.
yeah.
You only
Oh
have to
yeah.
be a little bit mad to leave you a negative one,
Oh
right?
yeah.
They're going to be the ones that are more
Oh
motivated
yeah.
to go and actually post a review
Oh
online.
yeah.
So, okay, so step one is don't panic. Step two is to just understand why they left that review.
Right. So I will say definitely once you saw that negative review, then you got to call them right away. Really do your best to figure out who that person is. You got to reach out to them right away to see whether there's anything you can do to repair the damage. And I will say a huge portion amount of time is it just miscommunication with the expectation. Just the expectation aren't aligned. And do your best to repair the damage offline. And the best case scenario is once you're able to take it offline, you repair the damage, that reviewer go back on, let's say, Google, move that 1-star review up to 5-star.
So they
And that
can go
really
edit
does, oh yeah. And
Okay.
that really does happen all the time. That really does.
Right. Yeah. My dad told me when I was young, he said, if you mess up, tell the truth, tell it all, and tell it fast.
Right.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Like that's what I really remember. And recently we had a gaffe where we messed up with a customer of ours.
Mm-hmm.
And he sent us a scathing email about 8:30 at night. And I was at home and I got the email and I called him right then. And he
Right.
said, I can't believe you're calling me.
Oh
And I
yeah.
said, hey, look, I'm the owner. I mean, we take
Mhm.
this seriously. And boy, we turned a negative into a positive
Right. Oh
just
yeah.
like that. He's like, no worries. Thank you so much.
Right.
Because, he wasn't expecting us to respond so favorably and so quickly.
Right.
So does speed play into a fact on how fast you respond to that?
I would definitely say yeah, as soon as possible, right? Because they whoever left a review, they're heated.
Yeah.
So I would definitely respond to them right away, right? Now, here's an example I kind of want to share with you just for fun.
Yeah,
So
sure.
this is a classic example of a 1-star review that turned positive, and I just want to read this out to the folks that's listening in. This used to be a 1-star review and turned into 5-star. Once
So
it got turned,
I'm sorry, I was going to say, for everyone listening, what he's showing you right now is an example of where somebody left a 1-star review, and then he's going to read their response after the owner called them.
right.
So, yeah, this is going to be one where you turn a negative into a positive just by reaching out to them. So, yeah, go ahead.
Right. So this 5-star review now says, owner called and apologized for what happened and took ownership of the fault of his employee. Exactly what an owner should do. To err is human. Who doesn't? Definitely giving him another chance just because the owner was a gentleman.
Wow.
But if I were, let's say I'm looking at this funeral home, let's say I'm right, a family member looking for services or even for pre-needs. Once I saw this on their Google review or Facebook review or Yelp, I'm like, wow, the owner is on top of things. If they feel short, I know the owner will make it up, which is a big deal.
There's a good point in that too, Welton, because one of the reasons why I like to read reviews is to know that I'm going to be taken care of, right? Like I don't want to make a bad decision.
Nope.
And the higher the ticket item, the more I care, right? Because there's more zeros behind that decision, right? If it goes bad, it's going to cost me even more money. So to see that, I think that would give me a lot of confidence, because if there was a negative review, right, then that person's demonstrating kind of how something went bad. And then the owner's demonstrating how they're taking care of that person. So I would have a lot of confidence looking at that than saying, even if everything wasn't perfect, at least that owner's behind it. That owner, he or she is going to take care of me if something happens. So that would feed right into why I read reviews anyway, which is, to have confidence. So that's really neat. That's really neat. And then let's say that you can't make them happy, right? Let's say that you call me up and I'm saying, Welton, there's just nothing you can say. I'm
Right.
upset, and I'm going to be upset
Right.
from here until
Right.
eternity. So there's nothing you can do. So as a funeral home owner, what can you do?
Right. I would definitely leave a public comment, which is very, very critical. Leaving that public comment is definitely not to start a war, but you still want publicly, whenever people are reading these negative reviews, at least they know your side of the story.
Give me an example. So you're the
Yeah.
funeral home owner. I've just left you a paragraph of scathing words saying how you guys disappointed me. You didn't meet expectations, etc.
Right.
You've reached out to me. I either won't accept your advance to try to make things right, or I ignore you altogether, right?
Right.
So you, as the funeral home owner, you post a public comment to my review, right? You're replying to my
Right.
review.
Yes.
What do you say?
Right. So I'll definitely err still on a little more on the side of being a little more apologetic. Again, you're not trying to be egocentric here. You're not trying to attack that person. Because literally I've seen some threads back and forth between the owner and the families. It just goes back and forth, and that's public.
Yeah.
That does not look good from a PR point of view.
No.
No.
And the last thing you want to do, going back to what I said, if I want, what they're demonstrating then is if I have a problem, then I'm gonna have a combative owner, right? I'm gonna end up fighting with, yeah. So I think to your point is leave a public comment, err on the side of apology, even if you don't think you're wrong, just apologize for not meeting expectations, and then everything you can do is try to just take it offline.
Right. I will definitely do that.
Gotcha.
And interesting, if you do not leave a public comment, Ellery, so when you're looking at let's say you're looking at a funeral home and the overall star rating is positive, and our eyes typically look at the negative review. And we'll read it very, very carefully just to see what happened. But if nobody from the funeral home came out and leave a public comment, we would think it's real, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So you
right.
definitely need to leave a public comment.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Now, it's really funny as I'm just thinking back, I was on a phone call a couple of weeks ago and there was about 8 funeral directors on the call. And we were talking about negative reviews. I think I was sharing this with you the other day, but one of them said, because we were talking about asking people for reviews.
Right.
And one of the owners said, what happens if I get a bunch of bad reviews? And I think after he said it, I think he realized kind of what a silly question that was, because the answer is, stop doing whatever you're doing that's making people give you negative reviews, right? I mean, we know just by the number of families you serve, you're not going to please everybody. You can't, right?
No.
You can try, but you're probably not going to, just because of miscommunications and whatnot. But if you're getting a bunch of them, right, or if you're that fearful of getting a bunch of them, then you probably have an operational problem, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Go with, but yeah, I thought that was pretty comical. So let's shift gears there a second, and let's talk about people with a nefarious heart. So you're my competitor, right? What stops me from going and leaving negative reviews about you? And does that happen?
Unfortunately, doesn't. They still can. Easily they can. Right. So I think depending on the network, Yelp is a little bit more, the algorithm does pick these type of scenarios up a little bit better. So it knows that if it's the same person who leaves or open up a bunch of fake accounts, because if you cannot keep those Yelp account active all the time, there's no way if I open up 20 fake accounts, leave myself, right, leave my funeral home all positive 5 stars,
right,
on all these 20 accounts. While I'm there, use these 20 accounts, leave my competitor negative reviews. But Yelp's filter knows that, hey, even if these are real, but these accounts are no longer active,
right,
all those reviews will be filtered out.
Yeah, and Google's smart, right? And Yelp is smart. I mean, if you've got 2 reviews over the last 3 years and now you've got 20 in the last 2 days,
yeah, it's not normal.
I mean, clearly, right? That's an easy thing to see.
Yeah.
But listen, let's say it's not your competitor, and I'm halfway joking about that. But let's say that somebody leaves you a negative review, right? You can't stop people from getting drunk and getting on the internet at 2:00 in the morning and saying something stupid. So let's say that somebody leaves you a review. It's clearly fake. It's clearly just a bunch of bull. What can you do about it? What recourse do you have, right?
Definitely. So I'll definitely still leave a public comment just in case Google doesn't take it down. Once you leave a public comment, log into your Google My Business account. It's very simple. It's google.com google.com/business. And for those of you who can see the screen, it's very easy. google.com/business. On the left-hand side, scroll down to reviews. And beside each of the reviews, there's little 3 dots. You hit on it and flag it as inappropriate. Then a human being within Google will try to figure out whether this is a real review or fake review.
Okay.
There's a very good chance they will take it down. But typically what they're looking at is, first of all, have you genuinely reached out to the reviewer? So it's very hard for Google to know that unless you left a public comment. That public comment, you need to tell a little story. Hey, I tried to reach out to this person, and most likely this person had left a review for the wrong funeral home, something like that.
Right.
So they know that you genuinely did your best. Just like BBB in the good old days, right? You're able to figure out who that person is and then try to work with that person to repair the damage. But with Google, they're just trying to figure out, hey, have you really attempted to try to reach out to the reviewer?
Yeah, that's a good point. And confusion happens, right? I mean, I think I told you before, we had somebody, a funeral director, leave something on our Facebook page one time that said, the CEO was a jerk and on and on and on. Well, we'd never talked to this guy, and so I just responded publicly and said, look, I apologize, that you had a bad experience, but unfortunately it wasn't us. Here's my number, please reach out to me. He never did. But I think if anybody goes and looks at that right now, they're going to see that we actually responded to that.
Yeah, that's great.
So I think it's about the only thing you can do. I wanted to make one point because it's so easy to get wrapped up into this metric called reviews, right? That we sometimes forget about what's behind that. And I think when I think about negative reviews and kind of how to process these and how to deal with these, I think it's important that we back up and that if you have a customer that's so unhappy that they leave you a negative review, you probably don't need to worry about that negative review at the most. You probably need to worry about that unhappy customer, right? I mean, that customer really needs to be taken care of. I mean, there's a problem there. And the negative review is a byproduct of that. But at the end of the day, if you're more concerned about the review, then you're more concerned about your business versus that customer, right? So you have to take that customer, and fix that problem, whatever that problem is, and learn from it, right? I mean, if you're getting a negative review for any reason, it's very, very easy to learn from it. And it goes back to what I've always learned about customer experience is that if there's a bad one, it always starts with an unmet expectation, right? They expected something and you didn't deliver that. Now, right or wrong, good or bad, and whether their expectation was founded or unfounded, it was theirs, and we didn't meet it, right? And so it's our job to kind of know what that expectation is to be able to meet or exceed that, to avoid some of those things, because oftentimes they're simple. Like that one thing you showed with Yelp, there's a negative review, owner responded, took care of it, now it's a positive review. He just fixed that. So. Well, anything else you want to add about the?
No, but I will probably just add monitoring wise, just make sure.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Right.
Yeah. How do you know if I'm a funeral owner? How do I know if somebody left me a bad review?
Right. So typically the email that you used to register for Google, for Yelp, for Facebook, those emails will always get alerted by the network whenever you get a positive or negative review. Okay. But typically funeral directors say they could be a previous funeral director who opened up the Yelp account or a Google account. Nobody's monitoring those email accounts. So make sure you're monitoring those email accounts.
Well, I think to the point is that you should make sure that you claim your listing.
Yes, definitely.
Right? So if I'm a funeral home owner and I've never claimed my Yelp listing, then I'm not going to get notified if somebody leaves a bad review. Okay, so the first step then would be to make sure that you claim your listings, right? And that Google and Facebook and Yelp has your current information, and then you control that information, right? You keep that email active so that you're getting that notification. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier, there are monitoring services out there, but you really don't need them, right? As long as you've got this email active, they're going to let you know if somebody leaves you a bad review, and they'll also update you if that person changes the review.
They will.
Okay, cool. Cool. Well, that sounds good. Well, listen, so I think this is really good. I think the gut reaction is to just reply back and say, you're crazy, don't leave me a bad review, you're wrong.
Don't.
So yeah,
Please don't do that.
yeah, I think that's probably a good, smart advice. So yeah, first thing, don't panic, right?
Right.
Take a step back, cool down, think about why they might have left that review, and then reach out to them, have them try to rectify it and change it. If not, at least leave a public response.
Yes.
Okay. And then if it is obviously spam or your competitor, you think it's fraudulent, then you do have some recourse. You can go into Google and tell them, I think this is wrong. They'll have a human being review it. And then lastly, make sure that you've got your current contact information, like Google, Yelp, and Facebook, so they can notify you if somebody leaves you a negative review.
Yes.
Okay. I'll add at the end here, I'll add that it's not the end of the world to get a negative review unless it's your only review.
Right.
Right. I think this goes back to the balance, right? If you have a ton of reviews, it's just going to make these, age, right, is going to matter, right? So the older the negative review, the better. It's just like a credit report, it goes back to, did you pay your bills or not, right? You can look at a credit report and tell, and I think people look at these the same way. So respond to them, but just get a bunch more positive, and they will drown out any of those, negative ones. So next week, we're going to talk about how to get more, right? So this will definitely help combat any of the negative ones that you get. But Welton and I've got quite a few good ideas on how you can get more reviews. And we're going to talk about, how you should ask people, when you should ask people, who you should ask. Next week, of all 3 episodes we've done on reviews, I think next week will be the most effective. And it's going to help you guys the most in the long run. So thank you for listening and watching. If you found this helpful, we do request that you go online and leave us a review. Okay.
Please.
On any of your favorite podcasting channels, good or bad. We just love to hear your feedback. So Welton and I are very easy to find, but we do truly do this podcast to help you guys, to bring different ideas and information. So hopefully you're getting value out of that. And if you are, we'd love to hear from you. So tune in next week. Thanks.
Bye.